March 2000. Somewhere deep in the rugged mountains of Oaxaca, Mexico. The night was silent. No traffic, no city lights, only the whisper of wind brushing through the dry grass. Inside a small wooden hut, a woman named Inés Ramírez Pérez, 40 years old, lay curled in pain. She was no doctor, no nurse, just a farmer's wife from the Zapotic tribe, living miles away from the nearest hospital. That night, as labor pains ripped through her body, there was no one around. Her husband was away. No midwife, no medicine, only the sound of her own breathing, sharp, trembling, and the distant stars watching from above. She knew something was wrong. This birth wasn't like the others. The pain was too deep, too sharp. She remembered the last time she gave birth, how close she came to death. And now, miles from help, she realized the truth. If she waited, both she and her baby would die. Then came a moment that would defy logic, fear, and even medical science. Ines made a decision, one no human should ever have to make. She decided to save her child with her own hands. She reached for a kitchen knife, still warm from the fire. She took a deep breath, whispered a prayer, and poured herself a cup of cheap liquor, the only anesthetic she had. Then, she lay down on a wooden table and with trembling hands, began to cut. 3:10 p.m., October 24, 2025, Azabas 44. The night grew colder. The stars outside burned like witnesses to a miracle about to unfold. Inside that dim hut, Ines pressed the dull blade against her stomach. Her hands trembled, her breath caught in her chest, and then she cut. The pain was unimaginable, but she didn't scream. She bit her lip, whispered her child's name, and kept going. Blood began to pool on the floor. Every second felt like an eternity. A battle between life and death fought in silence. Her vision blurred. Her body shook, but somehow, something stronger than pain kept her alive, a mother's will. For nearly an hour, she fought against her own body, slicing layer after layer until she saw a glimpse of life, a small movement, a fragile cry. Her baby. Through tears and blood, she pulled him out with her own hands, a tiny, trembling boy. He was breathing, alive. In that instant, the world stopped. The pain didn't matter. The blood didn't matter, only that cry, the sound of life she had given, at the edge of her own with the last of her strength. She cut the umbilical cord, wrapped her baby in cloth, and tied her wound as best as she could, before collapsing into unconsciousness. Hours later, when the villagers found her, they couldn't believe what they saw, a mother lying in blood, and her newborn child, alive in her arms. They rushed her to the hospital, and even the doctors, trained, experienced, unshakable, stood frozen in disbelief. One of them whispered, "This shouldn't be possible." Yet there she was, still breathing, still alive. 3:11 p.m., October 24, 2025, Azabas 44. When the doctors in Oaxaca saw Inés Ramírez Pérez, they froze. They had seen surgeries gone wrong, lives lost in seconds, but never, never had they seen something like this. Her wound was deep, rough, and yet precise. It was the mark of a woman who had no training, no medicine, only a reason stronger than fear, her child. The medical team moved fast. They cleaned her wounds, stitched her carefully, and stabilized her baby. And when both of them opened their eyes again, the room fell silent, a silence filled with awe. One of the doctors whispered, "Greater than if no one had told me this story. I would have never believed it." Days later, both mother and child, healthy, alive, breathing, left the hospital. The boy was named Orlando, a child born, not in a hospital, but in the hands of his own mother, a living symbol of love that defied every rule of science. News spread across the world. Doctors wrote papers, journalists wrote stories, and soon, Inés Ramírez Pérez became known as the only woman in modern history to perform a successful C-section on herself and survive. But for her, it was never about fame. When asked why she did it, she simply said, "Greater than because I wanted my child to live." Today, people in her village still call her El Milagro Viviente, the living miracle. Her story reminds us that love, real love, can move mountains, silence fear, and even rewrite the limits of what it means to be human. Because that night in 2000, a mother didn't just give birth to a child, she gave birth to a legend.